These metal detectorists and archaeologists are just part of a team that is looking for one of the great lost battles of medieval history. A battle that continues to shape the political geography of these islands right up to the present day. In 937, the King of the English, Athelstan, fought a coalition of his enemies, including the Irish, the Scots, the Northumbrians, and the Vikings. It was the Battle of Brunanburh, one of the bloodiest and biggest battles of early medieval history. But since that day, the site of the battle has remained a mystery, until now. The Battle of Brunanburh, fought 1100 years ago, saw King Athelstan win a crushing victory. The enemy's shield wall was penetrated, their troops ran back to their ships for safety. Thousands died. Apart from this, we know little else. No physical evidence exists of where the battle was even fought. But recently, a stunning discovery has been made. Countless hours of metal detecting and other remote sensing have uncovered thousands of objects in northwest England by the coast, on the Wirral Peninsula. I'm meeting early medieval historian Dr. Fiona Edmonds from the University of Lancaster to find out why this particular battle was so crucial. We're standing on what might be one of the most important battlefields in English and British history. Tell me, how did all the different players, all the different armies come to fight here?
Okay, so I'd say Brunanburh is really the epic battle of the 10th century in Britain, and it's really significant for several reasons. Firstly, that many of the key players of the time are involved. So on the victorious side, we have Athelstan of the Wessex dynasty, but by now ruling a substantial portion of what would become the English kingdom. And then we have Constantine, King of Alba, that's the core of what becomes the kingdom of the Scots. And then we also have Owain, King of the Cumbrians, which is a lost kingdom now, one maybe people haven't heard of, but it had just expanded quite significantly and was an important political player of the time. And then, of course, we have Olaf Godfrey's son, who has come from a dynasty that had dominated York and had ambitions to do so again. So you can see how really many very significant players in the politics of the time are here.
And we also have the Irish Norse, the Irish Vikings effectively as well.
Yeah, so this dynasty had really control of Dublin, and Olaf and those who came before him had dominated Dublin. He by now is dominating many of the other Hiberno-Scandinavian settlements. Limerick, for example, he's managed to set his stamp on. So he would have strong backing from these Gaelic Scandinavian groups, potentially from the Isles as well. But York is a glittering prize, and you know, say 4 of his relatives had been ruling in York, so it's understandable that he would have an interest in coming back to rule in that part of what's now northern England.
So this is a battle, unlike later medieval battles where they're fighting over the Kingdom of Scotland, the Kingdom of England. This seems to me a battle where the whole political complexion of the Isles is kind of up for grabs here.
I'd say there's been a lot of turbulence during the Viking Age, and really Brunanburh is encapsulating some of that turmoil and then pointing the way to the future. And really what's at stake here is control of what we now know as Northern England, but at that point there was not necessarily any inevitability about where that large swathe of territory would end up. It had been part of the Northumbrian kingdom, an autonomous kingdom, of which really the key part by now is York, and so it's still really all to play for, but Athelstan has a strong interest in this territory, and as of 927 had been ruling in York.
Talk to me about Athelstan, Alfred the Great's grandson, the forgotten, the kings really that made England. Say Alfred the Great, his son Edward the Elder, and Athelstan, a pretty extraordinary run of kings. Talk to me about his plans and why he ended up fighting here.
Really, the decade leading up to Brunanburh is crucial for Athelstan. After the death of Sigtryg, who'd been ruling in York, Athelstan seizes his opportunity to gain power there. He also is showing a strong interest in other parts of the Northumbrian kingdom, so areas that we would now call Lancashire. He clearly has some control there as well. And his ambitions don't stop there. There are signs that he has aspirations to be what he would know as Rex Totius Rex Britanniae, or king of all Britain. Now I'd say that's really an aspiration rather than the reality, but he's quite serious about this, and in 934 he leads an expedition through northern England, and then both a land and naval expedition right into the heart of the kingdom of the Scots. This is very ambitious and shows serious intent, really, not only to take control of the Northumbrian kingdom as was, but to set his dominance elsewhere. However, this is fragile, and really what we're seeing at Brunanburh is Athelstan's ambitions being significantly challenged by other key players.
I'm sure it's more complex than this, but is this almost, the English are in danger of becoming kind of superstate that dominates the Isles, and this is almost everybody else in this archipelago kind of ganging up on it?
Well, my own view is that what Athelstan's trying to achieve is very aspirational, and there is a certain fragility to that sense of English dominance. But it is the case that we have an alliance here, and potentially quite an unusual alliance. And we've got Olafur, who obviously comes from this Dublin dynasty that has dominated York for a couple of decades. We've got the King of Scots, we've got the King of Strathclyde or Cumbria. But also interesting is the fact that the Welsh kings appear to be absent from the battle. And there's an interesting theme there, because we know that they accompanied Athelstan on his expedition into the heart of the Kingdom of the Scots in 934. So it appears that there was a debate going on in Wales at the time, which itself is made up of various kingdoms. The debate is along the lines of, should we resist Athelstan, this king who is taking significant amounts from tribute from us, or not? And a great poem written at the time, a very emotive poem, suggests that they should be resisting, so potentially join this alliance, but it doesn't come to pass.
Why is this a lost battle? Why don't we know? We know where the Battle of Hastings was fought. Why do we? What are the sources? Are there just? Is there stuff missing?
Right, we do have some sources written pretty soon after the battle, and they give every sense that this was perceived as extremely significant at the time. So the Annals of Ulster, for example, calls it Bellum Ingens, an enormous battle which was fought horribly. And then we have, of course, a poem included in various versions of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which tells us some significant details. So we're not wanting source material from after the battle, but it does leave some of the key details open to debate. However, we do have the place name Brunanbruh in the Brunanburh poem, of course, and there's been obviously a long recognition that the only modern place name that can descend from that is Brombrugh on Wirral. When we come to the 12th century, we get a lot more information, and some of that information conflicts with what we might think about a location on Wirral. And crucial in this is John of Worcester, who says that Olaf's fleet came to the River Humber, and so that has been used to support various theories about a location in the east of England. And it has to be said that there are other sources potentially connected that give the Humber possibility as well, but my own view is that there are logistical problems with that.
So Athelstan was from the West Saxon dynasty, but he spent a lot of time in Mercia, didn't he? To what extent are these two formerly independent kingdoms becoming fused together now as this new English kingdom?
Well, significantly so by this time, and we know that there were Mercians fighting at the Battle of Brunanburh. The Brunanburh poem tells us so explicitly. So as far as Wessex and Mercia go, there is a real fusion underway, but what is still to play for is the north of what is now England, and this had been part of an autonomous kingdom, the Northumbrian kingdom. Now Athelstan is showing serious intent to dominate the north. He has already taken control of York. He has various lands in what is now Lancashire, but it's still not the England that we know today. There's another kingdom as far south as the Lake District, that's the Cumbrian kingdom, and the areas in between are really disputable territory, I would say. So this is still the England as we know it now is still very much in the process of formation, and I'd say there's not yet an inevitability it will take the form that we're familiar with.
We've got the Hiberno-Scandinavians from the north of England, parts of Ireland. We've got Britons, if you like, from Strathclyde, Cumbria. Tell me more about Constantine and the Scots, because they're a long way from home here.
That's right. But Constantine was a very significant king in his own right. He'd had a very long reign. His reign lasts for more than 40 years, which is extraordinary in this period of history. And indeed, the Brunanburh poem notes that he's an old man by this time. However, we shouldn't underestimate the significance of his kingdom. The kingdom of the Scots is in a process of formation, is really now a very significant player. And of course, the former Northumbrian kingdom lies just to the south of their core area, north of the Firth of Forth. So any goings-on in York will be of interest to them. Any goings-on the west coast of Mercia and what had been Northumbria will be significant to them. And most significantly, Athelstan had really threatened Constantine in 934 when he launched a naval and a land expedition into the core of the kingdom of the Scots. So I would say it's understandable why Constantine would wish to join this alliance and make the effort to come so far south, if indeed he did, in order to fight the battle. What you can see really is Athelstan's ambition, not only to set his stamp on the north of England, but really to play a dominant role elsewhere in Britain, as he would proclaim as Rex Totius Britanniae, King of all Britain. That's his aspiration. And at Brunanburh, we're seeing a certain resistance to that, of course. And although on this occasion the resistance is not successful, by 2 years later, Athelstan is dead. The Dublin-York dynasty is back in control of York. However, I would say that it does point the way to what we see in the later 10th century, which is a formation of an English kingdom moving towards what we would know as the England of today.
Why do you think the battle was most likely fought on the Wirral rather than in the east of England?
I've always kept an open mind about the location, but what I've always thought is that the west coast is so much more likely than the east coast. And of course the Wirral has really a good, strong claim because it has the place name Brunanburh, which is the only modern place name that can descend from Brunanburh, although there are other west coast candidates. Now the east coast has been supported by some historians because a chronicler, John of Worcester, and various other sources from the 12th century say that Olaf's fleet came in via the river Humber. But it has to be said that those are later sources, even if they have some earlier elements to them. And sheer geography, the logistics of taking a fleet around the northern tip of Scotland would suggest that that was unlikely, and Olaf is much more likely to have brought his ships to the west coast.
So is this quite exciting for scholars like you? If the archaeologists here can prove that this is the battlefield, does that solve the big mystery that dominates your period?
Well, I'm sure there's long been debate. There will probably always be debate, but obviously any new finds that are suggestive and point towards a location which always did seem to be a strong candidate would indeed be very helpful. And I imagine the debates will continue, but it's really possibility of finding new evidence to support that location, which has long seemed really the front runner for the Battle of Brunanburh.
An archaeological discovery of this magnitude doesn't happen overnight. It requires a lot of hard work and passion. This entire excavation, this entire discovery has been made thanks to a group of wonderful volunteers, metal detectorists, archaeologists, place name experts, numismanologists. They're called the Wirral Archaeological Society, and you'll never meet anyone more passionate, more enthusiastic about their subject matter. Pete Jenkins shows me what some of the team has unearthed so far. You all right, Pete? How's it going? Good to see you. So, Peter, you seem to be the lead metal detectorist on this outfit.
I wouldn't say I'm the lead one, but I generally do the planning to come out, and they leave it to me. But it's we're a collegiate attitude to everything really right now.
You must have walked these fields a fair few times.
Over the last 2.5 years, I seem to spend most of my time here. Yeah.
2.5 in this particular field, or right across the whole battlefield?
Mostly in this one field
really?
Right now. We have had some ventures in, but we found a site that is producing a lot, so we stay in there till we clear it now.
What kinds of objects are you lifting out of the ground here?
Well, in the last 2.5 years, we've recovered over 2,200 pieces of metal, approximately. mainly of iron, but we've got bronze, we've got silver, traces of gold in some of that, lots of alloys, brasses, about 7 or 8 metals to date.
And that's a lot more than you'd expect to find in a random farmer's field.
I've never ever experienced anything like it. Never seen it, and none of the other team members have either. It really is quite unique, we think.
And can they be linked to the 10th century? Can they be linked to this battle?
We do. We have artefacts that have been looked at. Some of them have been quantified already. We have a number of weapons, personal objects, gaming pieces, numerous things that can be attributable to that period. And we have pieces with runes on them as well, which is rather exceptional.
Wow. Can I see a few? Have you got any?
I have a few on me here. Right here we have a bronze brooch. It's been metal tested. We think it was possibly covered in gold. It looks like some stone has been moved out of it. You can see the depression there.
Wow.
But that is compatible with the type of brooch that would have been worn by both the Hiberno-Norse and maybe the Anglo-Saxons.
Sort of fixing.
Yeah, it's a bit of bling. It would have shone like gold at the time, even though it's an alloy. So yeah, that's one of the. We have several brooches, to be honest. Right now.
What else have you got?
Right. This here is the form of a pommel, and we believe it's Norse, and we think it's actually originated in Dublin. If you look very closely at the bottom, you can see some circles which have been stamped in to here. It's not very good, but that would have been covered in something like bronze or even silver, depending how high status the owner was. And we have had traces of silverine identified on that particular piece.
These are that's the very bottom of the grip of a sword.
Well, it's on the top basically. So you've got that, you've got the hand grip, and then you've got the hilt, and then you've got the blade.
Right.
So it's a counterbalance, really.
It's the exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's clearly a piece of weaponry from the battlefield.
It's definitely a sword pommel. We know that categorically. This is one of 15 or 16.
That doesn't leave you guessing, does it?
It doesn't really. It's a spearhead.
How do we know that's not from a Civil War battlefield, the War of the Roses?
Well, we've got the continuity. We've been finding where they've been smelting metal after whatever the event has been, and they're turning the metal into bar billets, and then they're processing it into things that look like they could be a tool or a weapon. And this seems to be the third stage that we have at this moment in time.
And so you're confident that is not from the 17th century, that's got to be 10th century?
No, we've had it looked at by a number of archaeologists and people, historians from that period, and they're quite sure that these are going to be finished off into spearheads.
What else have we got? I'm very excited, everything comes out of your pocket, it's like, whoa, what's this?
This is it's an axe, and it's actually pattern welded, and it's actually, if you look very closely at the cutting edge, it's more like a tomahawk. It's not the two-handed battle axe, so this is a sidearm. It's actually been split at some stage, and some carbonised steel, so it gives it a hard cutting edge, has been placed into there right now.
So this is an axe, but it's not for chopping wood.
It's not for chopping wood, it's for chopping men, I'm afraid.
You've got your pockets full of artefacts. I mean, how many warlike artefacts have you pulled out of the ground here on this battlefield?
Well, we pulled 2,200 artefacts roughly out of the field, but when it comes out, the concretion's really heavy on it, so we have to dry it out, and then we have to preserve it. So it's a work in progress.
So you've been working on this for years. You've found over 2,000 objects. What percentage of the sort of battlefield area do you feel you've surveyed comprehensively?
Probably less than 10%. I think we're several years to work on this site. The field that we have here, I believe, is unique. I'm not sure that we know of anything that compares, and we need academic help. We need the help of archaeologists and historians. We need to put this jigsaw into its right context.
Holding these finds in my own hands is rather exciting, but somebody has to make sense of the thousands of objects discovered. And that person is Dr. Claire Downham from the nearby University of Liverpool. Claire, this is pretty exciting, isn't it?
Very exciting.
It is very exciting. We might be on one of the most important battlefields, really from the medieval period. Why do you think this might be the Battle of Brunanburh?
Okay, well, there's two things. There's the contextual information, and then there's the specific finds. So Brunanburh on the Wirral really is the only place name in Britain that can directly tie to the name Brunanburh. And for years, scholars have thought that this is the most plausible location for the site. There's never been consensus, and I think that reflects how important the event is, that there's many different theories. People have wanted to locate it to other sites. But this one has consistently been a credible location. Also in terms of where the different combatants could meet together, this is a good location. And what Wirral archaeology have been doing over the last few years is they've been studying the landscape of the area, and they've also been metal detecting and come out with a very rich number of finds. There's lots of bits of metalwork coming out of the ground. Some of those are clearly 10th century, some of those are clearly weapons. There needs to be a full review of the evidence, but it's pointing in a very hopeful direction that they have actually nailed where the battle site is.
Where were people coming from?
Okay, so one of the main contingents is of course Athelstan, who is the King of Wessex, but he's also supported by the peoples of Mercia at this stage. And of course the River Mersey marked the northern boundary of the Kingdom of Mercia. The name means the border river. You've then got the main opposition contingent, which is the Vikings of Dublin under the leadership of Anlaf. And of course it makes sense that if you're crossing from Dublin across the Irish Sea, the Wirral is a sensible location on the boundaries of Mercia. And then you've also got the northern contingent, so Constantine of Alba and Owain of Strathclyde, which is the area around modern Glasgow. And it's assumed that their forces came down together, perhaps as a land army. And again, this perhaps would be a sensible meeting point for those different troops to converge.
The Mersey is really just, well,
just north of the Wirral. Yeah.
Just north of the Wirral, just there.
Yeah.
So this is the absolute northwestern tip
Yes.
of Athelstan's kingdom, and we're sort of ideally placed for forces from the north and then across the Irish Sea to kind of gather. This feels like a kind of fulcrum, really.
Well, yeah, and also it is a defined space. You know, the Wirral is surrounded on three sides by water. We know that Vikings from Ireland had settled here at the early 10th century, so it's possible that the armies of Dublin thought they might have a sympathetic local audience here. And the site of the conflict is more or less on that sort of cultural boundary between the area of Viking settlement in the Wirral and where the people of Mercia had held land for centuries.
Let's talk about that geography a little bit. So we think the Vikings obviously came from the sea. Where was Athelstan's English army coming from?
Well, they presumably might have gathered around the base at Chester first, because that would obviously an existing fortress that would be full of supplies that could, you know, the troops could refresh themselves before they came up and then met at the site here. The gathering of troops is obviously very large scale, so it's possible there might have actually been a few days or maybe even a few weeks of standoff when the armies have sort of gathered before actually conflict takes place. And we don't know, of course, the immediate circumstances that led to that, but it seems that the forces came out from Chester and then approached the encampment of the Vikings. They might have been settled here at that time, ready for combat, and the conflict obviously took place. Now, one of the frustrations we have really is that we don't have much in the way of contemporary evidence about the battle. Our main source is really the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for the year 937 and the poem that was written after the victory of the Mercian and Wessex troops over this coalition of Vikings and troops from North Britain. And of course that's a very slanted source because it's written by the victors, so they're obviously celebrating the extent to which they have crushed the opposition. And obviously the size of this conflict, the fact it was such a big battle, such a large gathering of troops, meant that they felt they really obviously had something to crow about. What the Anglo-Saxon poem does tell us is that the conflict was fought over a whole day and that there was also quite a long retreat. So once their troops of the Dublin side were realising they were losing the battle, they started to withdraw, and then there was quite a prolonged process where the army of the English was chasing them back to where they had moored their ships.
Which we think is up at the top of the Wirral Peninsula up there.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of terrible rolling fighting, which is the hardest thing to do in battle, is to conduct a fighting retreat. So,
yeah.
And that would have happened sort of up this valley here.
Yes, absolutely. And the sort of topography of the landscape has changed a lot over the last 1,000 years. So, but some very interesting study of this has been done by Wirral archaeology, where they're looking at natural ravines in the landscape that might have channeled the troops in a certain direction. They've also looked at the water courses, so how the Vikings would have got back to their ships, but in such a way to make use of the sort of limitations of the landscape and water, so that their ships could be got back to fairly safely, because that would have been, you know, quite an epic thing to achieve, to retreat, but also get back in your ships and get away. So it's certainly quite a dynamic time.
Okay, so that's what we think though from the sources. What have you, but from the early findings that have been made here, how do you think that marries with what you're learning on the ground?
Well, the work that's been conducted by Royal Archaeology is a team of very dedicated local metal detectorists, and they've been looking for Brunanburh for a while, and they have found some very productive sites. It's clear that some of the finds are very relevant, so that they found items, for example, there's a part of a sword blade, there's part of a sword pommel. They found other things that are parts of weaponry, sort of bodkins, which are sort of piercing in conflict and things like that. So there's obviously a comprehensive review of that material needed, but it really is pointing to the fact that we are narrowing down where the battle was fought. And so far what they found is maybe evidence for associated activity with the battle. So maybe where there was a camp, maybe some evidence of metal reprocessing. And there's still more work to be done. And I know that they're doing some geophysical work as well to try and track down the exact battle location. But we're still in process at the moment. This is a very exciting time when, we're starting to gather a kind of critical mass of finds and evidence, but we know there's also still more work to do to completely nail all the details of what might have happened here.
How exciting is it that this might be the site of the Battle of Brunanburh?
It's very exciting. One of the real challenges of battlefield archaeology is that some of our most famous battles in England, we've never really found credible evidence for. What we seem to be finding here is a nice correspondence between historical sources, which point to the location of the battlefield, study of local topography and landscape to understanding how a conflict might have been played out across this area, but also a large number of archaeological finds which are pointing in the right direction to really nail the location of the Battle of Brunanburh, which is of course one of the most famous early conflicts in English history. So this is a great opportunity at the moment. There's things still coming out of the ground, there's more research still to do, but hopefully in a short time we'll be able to bring all that evidence together and make a really conclusive argument.
As the search for more evidence continues, I'm feeling incredibly lucky to have been one of the first people to be shown around this site. The results that I've seen here today are compelling. I'm looking forward to hearing the scientific evidence coming in over the next few months, but it seems to me like these people have found the lost site of the Battle of Brunanburh. And if that's true, that's massive. It's one of the biggest archaeological finds of my lifetime. This is the most important battle after Hastings of the whole of the Anglo-Saxon period. For centuries, it's been lost. And these guys might just have found it.